Today, we're not really looking at a musician. We're not even talking about an artist, in the usual sense. What we're doing is deconstructing a creative genius as a systems engineer. We're pulling apart the work of Richard D. James, you probably know him as Aphex Twin, to find the literal source code behind his legendary and, let's be honest, often intimidating complexity. This isn't about music theory. Nope, this is about engineering principles. We're going to treat a whole career in music as a series of brilliant solutions to really tough technical problems, all leading to one single, powerful equation that just might redefine what it means to be original. So our whole deconstruction, it kicks off with a simple, an almost impossible question. Picture this. It's 1982, you're a kid in Cornwall, England, and you're staring at a Sinclair ZX81 computer. Now this machine, it's a marvel of minimalist design for its time, but it has one famous, absolute limitation. It is completely 100% silent. The manual says so, the hardware proves it, there is no sound chip. So when a magazine starts a competition to make sound on this silent machine, how do you even start? What's your first move when the main problem is a physical impossibility?
The answer? You don't play by the rules. You don't even try to make music. A young Richard James figured out that the problem wasn't his lack of musical tools, the problem was the machine's intended limitations. So what did he do? He hacked it. He figured out that by messing with the machine's code really fast, he could actually interfere with the television signal the computer used for its display. And this interference, this static, it created a raw noise, a frequency. He didn't find sound, he reverse-engineered the hardware to build a frequency generator from nothing. And that single act, finding a ghost in a silent machine, it's the key to absolutely everything that comes next.
Now that wasn't just some clever hack. Oh no, it was the proof of concept for an entire philosophy that we're going to call the Aphex Rule. This is our first section, the ghost in the machine. It's all about that moment a ghost of sound was found in a silent computer, which laid the groundwork for a whole new way of thinking. It's the idea that the most amazing results, they don't come from using a tool the way it's supposed to be used, they come from understanding its systems so deeply that you can force it to do the impossible.
You know how most artists, they look for approval from their scene, from their peers. It's totally natural, right? You want to know if you're on the right track. But in that isolated bedroom, James had literally no one to tell him that making sound on a ZX81 was impossible. So his isolation, it became a huge strategic advantage. It created what our source material calls strategic sovereignty. It's this state where the only limits are the actual physical laws of the hardware, not, what's cool or trendy in a scene. Without anyone around to enforce the right way to do things, the only path he could take was pure, unfiltered experimentation.
And that independent mindset? It didn't just stay in the bedroom. As James got older, he spotted a much bigger silent machine that needed hacking, the music industry itself. He saw a whole system that was designed to take all the raw, chaotic energy of early electronic music and just package it into something sterile, predictable. And that brings us to our second section. The interface is the enemy. This is where the fight moves from a single circuit board to the entire culture of commercial music.
See, the industry wasn't looking for a unique frequency. It was busy manufacturing a predictable commodity. This is creative work that's not engineered for innovation, but for the biggest possible audience. Back in the early 90s techno scene, this meant relying on stuff everyone already knew. That steady, four-on-the-floor kick drum, super clean production that wouldn't scare anyone off, and songs that followed a simple formula. It's music made to be easily consumed, put in a box, and sold. And for James, this was the absolute opposite of that modified signal he was chasing. That raw, unfiltered sound he first discovered in the static of a TV screen.
Okay, so this slide just lays out the whole conflict perfectly. Over on the left, you've got the commodity. Those endless 4/4 beats, the verse, chorus, verse structure, the commercial presets that come built into every synthesizer, all of it designed for one main goal, to be relatable. But then, on the right, you have the signal. We're talking modified, custom logic that shatters normal rhythm, pushing towards what he calls algorithmic ceilings instead of just staying on the floor. It's about literally sabotaging your hardware to break free of presets and making the very strategic choice to be difficult on purpose. This is a full-on war between comfort and complexity.
And all this led him to a really profound conclusion. The interface is the enemy. The commercial software, those synthesizers with all their neat labeled buttons, the industry gatekeepers. They weren't just neutral tools. They were an interface, a layer sitting between the creator and the machine's actual potential. And it was designed to guide you towards a predictable commercial result. It was a cage of limitations disguised as a creative toolkit,
making sure you conformed at every single step and making real innovation almost impossible. So what do you do when the interface is the enemy? Well, a real engineer doesn't just complain about it, they go deeper. They bypass the interface and go straight for the source code. And that brings us right to Section 3, hacking the source code. This is where we look at the engineering method James developed to systematically take sound apart and rebuild it from its most basic, data-driven level. Now, to really get his method, you have to remember this guy was an engineering student. For him, electronic music wasn't some abstract art form, a collection of feelings or vibes. It was a system. It was a high-fidelity audit of data. Sound was a signal, rhythm was just math, and emotion was a measurable, triggerable frequency. This mindset, it changes absolutely everything. It means music isn't something you just feel your way through. It's a system of variables, frequency, amplitude, duration, timbre, that you can analyze, deconstruct, and manipulate with surgical precision. And his main tool for this audit was something called tracker software. It's a type of music program that shows music vertically, like a spreadsheet of code, not like a piano you play from left to right. Using it wasn't about songwriting, it was a full-on forensic process. So let's break it down. Step 1. Isolate the millisecond. He would zoom way in on a single sound wave to pinpoint the exact moment a nice sound crosses the line into what our brains hear as just jarring noise. Step 2. Map the frequency. He would then chart these crazy boundary-pushing frequencies, basically making a personal map of the wavelengths that trigger specific human reactions, from total discomfort to pure joy. And finally, Step 3. Oscillate the micro-edit. With all that data, he would just systematically erase the standard model of a techno loop and rebuild it from scratch based on his new data-driven map of what makes a sound hit you hard. This engineering approach wasn't just for software either. He did the same exact thing to his hardware, a practice we're calling custom gear logic. He was famous for buying synthesizers like the Yamaha DX100, taking them apart and physically modifying or even sabotaging their circuits. He wasn't just breaking things for fun, he was strategically bypassing the manufacturer's presets. He knew that those presets were part of the interface, designed to give you a specific commercial sound. So by breaking the machine, he was breaking its intended limits and unlocking a truly unique, unfiltered signal that literally no one else on Earth had access to.
But all of this technical work, the software forensics, the hardware sabotage, it all had a very specific goal. This wasn't just some intellectual exercise. It was all about engineering a powerful, undeniable human response. It was about taking this custom-built signal and making sure it had the maximum possible sensory impact. And that leads us to our fourth section, engineering the response, or how you take a signal and turn it into a full-blown neurological event.
So if you look at his career, it's not just a random string of albums. It's a strategic timeline of signal activation, where each big release was engineered to solve a specific problem. In 1992, Selected Ambient Works directly attacked that cold, functional club commodity by taking dance rhythms and injecting them with these beautiful, sad ambient textures. Then, in the late 90s, he took on a new problem, the fact that electronic musicians were totally faceless. His collaborations with the director Chris Cunningham were engineered to close what he called the trust gap, using unforgettable and often terrifying visuals. And by 2001's Droox, the system just hit its peak, a relentless, super complex neurological audit of the listener's brain.
Let's just focus on that middle part for a second, the visual engineering. Electronic music was anonymous, right? The artists were invisible. So how do you connect with a global audience? The solution was brilliant. Use his own face, twisted into these expressions of pure horror and bizarre humor to directly touch the viewer's retina. The music videos for Come to Daddy and Windowlicker, they weren't just weird. They were calculated acts of sensory engineering designed to close the genre's trust gap through sheer, unforgettable visual dominance. You can actually think of the impact like this chart. A standard music video, maybe showing a DJ in a booth, has a pretty low retinal impact. You watch it, you might like it, but then you move on. What James and Cunningham did was signal activation. It was designed for maximum neurological and retinal impact. It was impossible to be neutral about it. You were either shocked, or you were laughing, or you were horrified, but you were never, ever bored. It was engineered to be completely unforgettable. He even applied this engineering brain to his live shows. An Aphex Twin concert is not a party. It's a neurological synchronization audit. It's a controlled experiment in what the source material calls sonic battery. He is systematically testing the audience's sensory limits with extreme volume, overwhelming complexity, and abrasive frequencies, all perfectly synchronized to strobing, chaotic visuals. He's not just playing music, he's gathering data on the human nervous system's breaking point.
Okay, so we've seen the origin story, we've identified the enemy, and we've looked at the engineering methods he used to fight back. Now, in our final section, we're going to boil it all down into one single powerful formula, the Aphex equation. This is the universal principle of sovereign complexity.
The whole philosophy, it starts right here. The loop is the floor. That repetitive, catchy, four-on-the-floor beat that defines so much popular music, that's not the goal. That is the absolute baseline. It's the minimum requirement, the concrete foundation that something way more interesting has to be built on top of. It's the starting line, never, ever the destination. And if the loop is the floor, well then, the algorithm is the ceiling. True creative potential isn't found in just repeating a loop better than the next person. It's found in understanding, mastering, and ultimately creating the underlying system, the algorithm, that generates those loops in the first place. The ceiling is basically limitless, but only if you're willing to stop being just a player in the game and start becoming an architect of the system itself.
Which brings us to the equation itself. Interface bypass plus custom logic equals sovereign complexity. All right, let's break it down one last time. Interface bypass is that active choice to reject the presets, the standard tools, and the easy, obvious path. Custom logic is the hard part. It's the work of building your own rules, your own systems, your own modified gear from the ground up. And the result when you add those two together? It's not just complexity for the sake of being complex, it's sovereign complexity. A unique, powerful, and self-governing creation that exists entirely on its own terms. So what is sovereign complexity, really? Well, as this slide lays out, it's a fundamental rejection of the need to be relatable. It's the strategic power of being difficult on purpose, which forces the world to meet you on your terms. It's a calculated displacement of the norm, which creates a category where you're the only one in it. And maybe most importantly, it's the only documented antidote to becoming obsolete. You can't be forgotten if there was never anything to compare you to in the first place.
Now, the point of breaking this whole system down isn't just to stand back and admire it. It's to actually apply it, which leads us to our final question, and this one is for you. What is your ZX81 moment? What's the no sound chip constraint in your own creative work or in your job? What's that accepted limitation, that routine you do every day, that pre-packaged interface you've been using without a second thought just because, well, that's how it's always been done?
Because here's the final takeaway. The truth isn't in the vibe, it isn't in the trend, it's in the underlying logic of the system you're working in. And that unique, personal, sometimes messy complexity that you might be trying to smooth out to fit in, that is not a flaw. That is the very source code for your greatness. The challenge isn't to follow the interface, it's to find your own ghost in the machine.